Good morning, Internet. It's Jason here from Godlike Productions again. Just doing take two of a bit of a tutorial for advanced VSIG editing, and I've fixed up my OBS settings so it should be nice and smooth now. So just to run through what we're going to be doing here, I've been developing this vocoder algorithm, and it's a pretty complex algorithm, so let's just have a look at it. It's pretty big, quite complex. So there's 32 bands of vocoding in here, and during development of this, one of the things that I've been working on is to try and improve these peak filters, or these peak detectors. So what I really wanted to use was the envelope detect, but there was some problems with it. And so I ended up with this peak instead. But what's happened is that in the meantime, Eventide have released a new version of VSIG, updating the operating system. So we've got this new multimeter detector in here, and I want to give this a go and see if this improves the vocoder. Now, one of the problems I've got here is I've got all these peak blocks that need to change, and for me to go through and rewire all these by dragging and dropping things is going to be time consuming. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to show you how I approach this and do a bit of a hack in the text file to do all this work for me. So just to run through quickly what we're going to do, we're going to take this, we're going to replace one of the peak filters. We're then going to open up the VSIG2 file in a text editor, and then we're going to make modifications to that folder using some bulk editing or bulk replaces to try and bring these into line so that we can open up a new revision of this that's got all those changes made. Right, so let's start. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in this new multimeter block, and I'm going to stick it just under this first peak block, and I'm going to set the order of it. So at the moment it's 258, so I'm going to take this up to 26, which is one above the number 25 of the existing peak filter. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to replace all of the connections for this filter into the multimeter. So to find out what's connected to peak filter, I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm going to click on the peak. And this highlights that block and it shows all the connections. So I'm going to take this connection here, pipe this into the input. Not sure that works. Let's just give it another go. There we go. And then I'm going to take the attack knob and take that into the attack on the multimeter and the release knob. So this defines how quickly this multimeter responds. And then I'm going to take the output of this peak filter and I'm going to take the peak out here, and I'm going to wire it into these two amp mod modules in here. So the way that this vocoder works is that there's a mono modulator signal that comes in and it gets analyzed by this filter network, and it detects the levels of each of the bands, and then it applies that to a stereo carrier. I've got some stuff up here. You can generate your own carrier like super saw wave inside the vocoder if you don't want to use one, but there's a few other bits and pieces too as well, but essentially that's the way that these networks work. Okay, now to double check that I've connected this up correctly, let's just click on this. That's disconnected the output, so that's good, and this one here's got the outputs connected that I want. So let's delete this peak block and let's put the multimeter block in its place. Right, so we've now done the one replacement, and what I want to do is I'm going to use the text editor to replicate this for all the rest of the peak blocks. So let's just save this as a new revision, and if anyone has files of mine before, the way that I work with revisions from my engineering background is that I use letters for anything that's pre-release, and then I use numbers after the initial release. So I'm going to change this to Rev P. I was at Rev O before, and let's just save this in here. Yes, I've done this before because OBS didn't want to play the game. But anyway, all fixing it now. And this takes a little while to save. It's quite a big file. Okie dokie. So let's go in, find, this is where I've just saved it here. And I'm going to open this up in the text viewer or the text editor I use called Notepad++. And this is a good little third-party editor for Windows. But you can use whatever editor you're comfortable with. The better the sort of search and replace tools are, the easier this is. So you can use multi-line editing or whatever you want to use. I'm just going to use search and replace here. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's go down and have a look at this change that I've made. So this is one of the existing peak filters. So this is peak filter number 2, and this is number 1 peak filter that we've replaced with a multimeter. All right. So the first thing that we need to see change is that this filter type and the name of it needs to be updated. So the first part is it's a peak block, and the name of it is peak:2. So what I want to do is I want to just change that to multimeter. So that's going to be one of the first changes we make. I could just change peak to multimeter, but one of the problems with that is that if we have a look in here, it can change a lot of things. So I want to try and get it as specific as we can, because just changing peak could have some ramifications later on, and I just want to make sure that I'm changing just the specific bits I want. The next thing that we need to look at is that in the peak we have this type =0, which is it's not a parameter that's available for multimeter, so we need to get rid of that. And then also, it used to be called, in the peak it's called attack control. This gets changed to attack. Decay control gets changed to decay. And then we have to add all these extra parameters in here. So we've got the hold, RMS time, and the meter decay. So that needs to be added in because they're not included in the peak filter. So to take you through this file a little bit, there's a head. The header's up the top, and then this is just basically a list of all the blocks in order as I go down here until we get to the tail, which is here. And then everything underneath here is actually the blocks that are the position of the blocks. So we need to make sure that all these peaks again get changed to multimeters. All right, so we're gonna do that later, but we have to be a little bit careful about some of our terms. And one of the reasons I chose this file is because it is quite complex. So some of the easier blocks you just need, it's just like one search and replace. In this instance, we're going to have to go through, make a few modifications, change a few things around, and just be a little bit careful with what we change, because if we don't get this exactly right, it's not going to open up in VSIG. Right, so let's just close that one, don't need that one. Right, so we'll start off, we're going to replace, let's just start off with this peak and replace that with multimeter. So we're going to change all of the block headers that we want. So Control H brings up things, so peak, and I want to change this to multimeter. So let's just copy that. Right, so that's the things that we want. I'm going to match case, I'm going to wrap it around so I do the whole thing and replace all in the file. Okay, so we've changed the header. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to change this attack control to attack. So copy that, put this up in here. We want to change that to attack. Now I could type these in, but copying and pasting it just makes sure that I get it exactly the same and I don't do typos with my fingers. So that's attack decay, so the attack, and then we're going to do the decay control, not delay control. Up here, and we're going to change that to, where are we? Decay. And we'll just replace all of those. Okay, and then the next one that I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the type =0. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to select both of the pipe characters, and I'm just going to replace it with one pipe character. Just like that. Okay, that fixes up all of those. So now the multimeters are good up to this point, but we still need to add these extra parameters on. Now, I can't just replace out, because if I just select out, you can see all of these different blocks have got these outs in it. If I replace this with something, it's just going to break everything. I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this release one out, because all of the blocks are connected to release one. Okay, so all of my they all had a single controller that controlled all of them. So I'm going to replace that with this section here. So that's unique to just that block. Okay, replace all. And you'll see it's added this extra thing to this block. So I'm just going to get rid of that. I don't need that because it's been repeated. So we see now that the old peak that was here has now been replaced with multimeter. It's preserved the numbering. We've got the in filter, we've got the attacks, we've got the decays, holds, RMS time, meter. So those have all been fixed now. Okay, the next one that I want to do is I need to replace all of the remaining peaks. Now, if we just do a quick find for peak, Control F, peak. Okay, you can see that we've got in these first two amp mod blocks is peak out. So the ones after that, they have out instead. Where are we? They come from peak out somewhere. Amp mod. So this mod is peak 2 out. So we don't have these peaks. But if I change these peaks up here, it's going. If I just replace peak, it's going to modify it to do that. So I want basically everything below this line here, 71. So I'm going to select 72. I'm going to go down to the end. And what I want to do is I want to do a replace, but I'm just going to do it in the selection. So I'm going to do peak with multimeter. Okay, so that should, in selection, replace all. So what we've just done is that we've replaced the peak with the multimeters, but what we need to go down is we need to have a look now at these. Where are we? Let's just get rid of that. We need to have a look at these amp mod blocks. Right. So what we can see here is that this is the first amp mod block, and we've see how it refers to this peak out here. That's what it's called. But if we have a look down at amp mod 3, wherever we are, amp mod 3, you can see that this one here now refers to multimeter 2 out and not peak out. Now again, I can't just replace these outs because this is just going to go nuts and break everything. So, but what we can do is that the rest of this remains the same. So if I selectively search out this string, the out onwards, and replace it with this peak out onwards, this should fix it for all of our blocks. So let's just do another replace, stick that in there, and I want to change it to say peak out with all of this on the end. So that needs to be a dash there. Out. It gets replaced with peak out. So we're going to do this for the. Again, I'm going to do this for the selection because I don't want to break these ones up. Should I break those? I'm going to break those ones. Right. So let's just replace all. Okay. Now we can see that all the amp mods have been updated with peak out. The ones up here have all been. They're all the same. They all seem to work. This amp mod. Is that one an extra one long? Oh, because this has increased the number, so we've gone from 9 to 11. So that's all good. We expect that to get bigger. So this all looks pretty good. So we've changed all of our peak blocks to multimeter blocks. We've made sure that the parameters line up, and we've gone through and we've changed the second part of these. We've changed all the peaks here into multimeters. So this should be good to go. Hopefully this is going to open up in our VSIG. So let's just save this as a new revision. Right. That, let's pull up our VSIG. Right, so let's now try and open up RevQ. We'll keep our fingers crossed that everything is doing what it's supposed to do. Where are we? RevQ. Open. Okay. So this has opened up successfully. You see that all of these peaks are now being replaced with multimeters. We'll just check a few of them, make sure that they're connected to where we're expecting them to be, which they are. Let's go down and have a look at this second row. Let's have a look at that one. That's a random one. So everything seems to be good here. I think this would be good to transmit to the H9000 and to give it a trial. Okay, so hopefully this is of use to all of you budding VSIG developers and gives you a little bit of insight into I guess where things can go to when you get a little bit more complex. I'd like to give a massive shout out to my supporters on Buy Me a Coffee. Your subscriptions really do give me motivation to keep bringing up new algorithms, and certainly this vocoder will be one of the ones that will be coming to you soon. I've got a bit of work to do on the presets of these to get all the frequency bands right so that we get that classic vocoder sound. So yes, all of you subscribers can expect this very soon. And for those that aren't yet subscribed, if you are getting value out of these tutorials and my content, it would be much appreciated if you could consider giving a subscription to me, or a once-off contribution, or buy some algorithms there at Buy Me a Coffee. I'll put the link down below. It really it's helping me save towards getting a Mac for doing some future VST work, and also I've got up there on my wish list a version or a Max license so that I can do some of the Max development and port those over to the H9000, because there's some things that Max is a bit better at than VSIG, and to try and accomplish some of those tasks, I'd like to give that a go in Max as well, and hopefully continue to develop some unusual and unique algorithms for you all. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. I hope you've got something out of this, out of this methodology, and hopefully it'll be time saver for you all as you go through your VSIG journey. I am going to do some more VSIG tutorials in the not too distant future. I guess those people a little bit hesitant or struggling a little bit with the concept of getting into VSIG, hopefully just give a few little pointers as some of, I guess, my predecessors for the H8000 have done. There's a bit of content on there. It's largely applicable to the H9000, but I guess, yeah, just refreshing some of that content and giving you all, I guess, a little bit of guidance to help you take those first steps into H9000 and VSIG. I'm very glad I did. It's a lot more fun than programming from emote, and you certainly have a lot more control, but it can be a time sink, and yeah, lots to do. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. I will see you all soon.